What is up, boys? It's your commissioner, Tim, back at it with the week 14 recap. Um, I'm going to have to change the setting around a little bit with I got some family coming over, so I can't use the office. And I had my booster shot yesterday, so I've been pretty out all day, but popped some Tylenol and feeling a little bit better. So let's get started with week 14 recap. So first, congratulations to all of us for officially having completed the inaugural regular season schedule of our Dynasty League. And now it's time to bowl season. Looking back on the regular season, the second half of the season was an absolute thrill. I don't think anyone predicted four teams being tied at 7-7, with the bottom two playoff seeds being decided on a tiebreaker, which got decided on the last game on Monday Night Football. Um, all eight teams finished quite strong in the second half of the season compared to the first half. And the league became more in parity as the season progressed. John secured three of his four wins in the last half of the season and ended up with a 1/8 Chubb, slightly better than a no Chubb, finishing at seventh, just ahead of Chota. In terms of the recap, I'm going to keep it a little short on the Week 14 recap from a matchup to matchup standpoint, but just talk about how the week shaped up in finalizing the playoff seeding. I want to keep this recap to a regular season recap, and I'll hand out some awards to managers and shout out to players. I know we haven't gone to the playoffs yet, but I think most season awards in professional sports are primarily done off of regular season performance. So I felt it's fitting to have our last regular season week recap be something that includes all eight managers in the spotlight. So, all right, starting off with how this week shaped up. We came into this week with the potential for four teams to tie at 7-7 and have a points for tiebreaker decide the remaining playoff seeds. And that's exactly how it went. Diving in a little bit deeper, after the Sunday morning games concluded, it looked like it was very certain that Trust the Process and Bills Mafia would be the ones making the third and fourth seats with the Washington Fantasy Football Team or with the Washington Fantasy Football Team being very much out of the run as he needed to make up, I think, 60 points on Bills Mafia and 90 points on Trust the Process. But with the afternoon games, Ben made it very interesting after a stellar near 30-point performance by George Kittle. And that took us into Monday Night Football, where really late in the game, second half, for a few moments late in that game, it looked like there was potential for Ben to upset Bills Mafia behind the performance of James Conner and Cooper Kupp. And I was rooting for some kind of drama, but the Cardinals just couldn't get it done. Ben did end up making some ground, but just not enough as he came up short by 22 points on the season in terms of the points for tiebreaker to ultimately not be able to take that 4 seed over Bills Mafia. So, looking at our 14-week regular season play and seeing the final record, it's crazy how close it was for Ben and Adam to be the ones in the playoffs instead of Trust the Process and Bills Mafia. So for Adam, right, you all remember that week 4 game where Adam came into that Monday Night Football game down just 5 with a red-hot Mike Williams left to play. And Mike Williams had his first letdown game of that season and just scored 1.6 points with 11 yards on just one reception. Had that single outcome gone differently, Adam would be sitting at third seed with Bills Mafia playing in the Toilet Bowl. Or even in the case of week 11, when Adam decided to YOLO and start Tyler Huntley over Aaron Rodgers, that ended up costing him the matchup against Bills Mafia again. Any one of those two games having gone differently, again, both of those were against Bills Mafia, that would have changed the course of the season for both teams. And when it comes to Ben, he had a close game in week 10 where T.Y. Hilton returned from his concussion, but only ended up scoring a single point in a matchup against John that was decided by just 4 points. So really, this season was close. And now now that we're in the bowl season, anything can happen. I went back all 14 weeks to find how many times our managers have scored in the top 2 in the league as well as the bottom 2 in the league each week. Remember, I did that midseason analysis where the top 2 was what I call sort of the upset ability. if your team had multiple weeks in which you're scoring top 2 in the league, good chance that you're probably going to win those matchups, no matter who you're facing. And I also did another one for this recap where it was just a number of weeks in which managers scored in the bottom 2. So how likely are you to cause the other team a win because your team just performed badly? So every single team, when I did that, every single team, just to show you how we have no idea what may happen over the next 2 weeks in both of the bowls, every single team has had at least 3 weeks out of our 14 regular season weeks in which they were a top 2 league scoring for that week. With the exception of Chota, who unfortunately had 0, every other 7 teams had at least 3 weeks where they were top 2. And when you separate that out with just the playoff teams, Trust the Process led the way with 5, followed by Brady Star Dynasty with 4, Cup to Canada and Bills Mafia tied at 3 each. So that really shows you on any given week, any of the playoff team rosters can go off and win the week. That said, I think the more interesting and informative metric is also how many times our playoff teams have scored in the bottom 2, the opposite metric, right? The metric in which you cause another team to likely win because you shit the bed that week. Um, while all of the toilet bowl teams have had at least 4 weeks in which they were in bottom 2, the playoff teams, Trust the Process and Bills Mafia, had 3, while Cup to Canada and Brady Star Dynasty had 0. So, I mean, those were some really interesting metrics analysis that I was able to look at. So we're going to be in for a wild ride in this playoff season. And if I'm a bookie setting lines for the managers, I'd have a real hard time doing that given the fluctuation. I would still have to put Brady Star Dynasty and Cup to Canada as a favorite, given their consistency, but it's really anyone's guess, and I love that. So now over to the regular season managers and players recognition. So these are just some random things I want to call out. Some may not even be a positive recognition, but I'm going to try to stay away, shit talking and just really sort of make this positive as we all sort of have wrapped up our first inaugural season. Just want to make this fun and enjoyable for everyone. So this section, and again, sorry, I don't really have slides. I just haven't had the time, but I want to get this video out. So this section, I'm going to call the draft day steals. I'm going to start out with a few that I think were draft day steals. So in no order, but I'll start with Brady Star Dynasty. And Brady Star Dynasty, Tom Brady being picked up with the 11th round pick, he's currently QB1. So that's immense value. And with Tom Brady, he's probably going to be playing for at least another couple of years. On Ben's roster, he picked up Cooper Kupp with 11th round, who is WR1, 5th highest fantasy score overall. Jalen Hurts was picked up with the 6th round pick. Say what you want about him from an actual NFL player standpoint, but he's QB 6th and 8th overall. Kirk Cousins, his QB2, was picked up with a 20th round pick, who's QB 8 and 10th overall fantasy points. James Conner was picked up with the 16th round pick, who ended up the regular season at RB6, 24th overall. That's incredible, just list of players for Ben's team that were just draft day steals. Over to Trust the Process, Austin Eckler being picked with the 6th round pick. Finished the regular season with RB2, 11th overall. Leonard Fournette being drafted with the 14th round pick, currently RB4, 22nd overall. John Debo Samuel picking up 11th round, WR5, 18th overall. There's a few things to call out here, which is pretty crazy. QB2, WR1, WR5, all went in the 11th round. Sorry, QB1, which is Tom Brady, all went in the 11th round. So there was apparently some magic that was going on that round. I want some of that. So out of this list, if I was to pick one for the regular season format at least, and say what you want about the dynasty, but at least for the regular season format, at least the top draftee steal has to be Cooper Kupp for me. I think you can make the argument for Debo Samuel in a dynasty format though. And sort of using all this list, the second call out, obviously the best draft day steal manager has to go to Ben. Cooper Kupp, Jalen Hurts, Kirk Cousins, James Conner were all incredible draft steals, and really goes to show that if it wasn't for Christian McCaffrey being stricken with injury all season, Ben really could have become a favorite for the championship this year. I mean, we all saw that, right? Like he started out 3-0 to start the season, and with that injury, really changed everything around. But man, Ben's roster looks good. I know this is sidebar, but he's got some real amazing youthful talent there too. Justin Jefferson, who I consider to be WR1 in Dynasty, is on his roster as well, and he's got all of his draft picks. So I'm excited for Ben, and we'll talk more about each team and the 2022 projections when I do a video with Brandon in the preseason next year as we head towards NFL Draft Day. The second section that I want to call out is going to be the waiver pickup of the season. So this list is a lot shorter. In fact, it's just one. Same thing, but for waiver pickers. I don't think, I don't think I have to put any real long list. Yeah, sure, there's some, pickups here and there that were helpful. But really, there's a clear standout at number one, not just for our league, but everywhere. So I'm just going to mention this one. No brainer goes to Cordell Patterson. He became a different weapon finally on the Falcons at age 30 season, but he was RB7 for the season and likely made Eve's season. He spent only $6 fab. And I believe he was the only one that bid on him too. So perhaps the best $6 fab you can ever spend on a player, especially because he's picked him up heading into week 3. So that was almost a whole season, more than, 3/4 of a season in terms of value that he got from a waiver wire pickup that ended up becoming an RB7 for the season. I'm going to give this next section as the rookie of the year. And for me, the rookie of the year has to be Jamar Chase. And the runner-up is Jalen Waddle. Okay, so I'll give it a tie for Jamar Chase and Najee Harris, because I think you can make an argument for both, and you can make an argument for sort of dynasty values as well. So in terms of season impact, no question, Najee Harris. In terms of dynasty, I think Najee and Jamar Chase are right there together in that top tier in terms of rookies this season. And there's a tier right below that in his tier of his own. I think it has to go to Jalen Waddle, and it's, Ryan with both Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, man. And Kadarius Toney, who, hopefully is healthier next year and really shows some of the things that he was able to show in a couple of games this season, really in a season-long format. So, Ryan's got a real nice young roster. All right, so this next section is going to be sort of like the one negative. It's sort of like, it's not shitting on it, it's just a negative call out, which is, I'm going to call it just, well, that sucked recognition. And this is going to be a single player who really changed the course of the season for one of our managers in a negative way, and that has to go to Derrick Henry. Adam was sitting at the league high, and I had him in the heading into week 8 in my power rankings. I had Adam finally moved up to number 1. And then it was that week where, Derrick Henry had his injury. Adam was sitting 5-2 heading into week 8. And then, when he got injured in that Halloween game against the Colts, from there, Adam went 2-5 and missed the playoffs. Moving over to, well, that's cool recognition, sort of like the opposite of the recognition where a single player changed the course of a season for a manager, but for the positive, has to go to Jonathan Taylor. I think trust the process for me. I was accruing draft picks. Even before the season started, my whole mindset was, let me just accrue draft picks, build for the future. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor being a sophomore, felt like he fit my timeline really well. But man, did anyone really see this types of production coming in his second year? So, after acquiring Jonathan Taylor from no Chubb, then full Chubb, heading into week 2, Jonathan Taylor became the fantasy league leader in fantasy points scored in the league. And then after stepping into gear in week 4, because he was off to a really slow start, he turned around my season. I started out the season at 1-3, and Jonathan Taylor really single-handedly allowed me to go 6-4 to finish out the season and sneak into the playoffs somehow as a 3rd seed. And lastly, just as a fun recognition to just get every team involved, I'm going to pick who I think is the MVP for each manager. And some of these are going to be sort of repetitive in the previous sections, but I'm going to start with Eves. I think the MVP for Eves has to be Najee Harris. It was a 208 pick. RB3. Kid's a stud, and he's going to be a top 5 RB for many more years to come as long as he continues to get that legendary volume in that Steelers backfield. For trust the process, me, Jonathan Taylor already mentioned that. For Brandon, I think it's Austin Eckler. That post-week 4 acquisition for Eckler really turned around Brandon's season. I mentioned this earlier, right? But had he lost to Adam, which was all but guaranteed because Mike Williams, red hot coming to week 4, only had to score 5. That would have turned around Brandon's season. He probably would be building for the accruing draft picks, building for the future as well. But after winning that, he wanted to really try to push it, and he got Austin Eckler. And Eckler is, I think RB3. I mentioned it for the season, and Eckler should also be good for several more years to come, given his playstyle and relatively light tread on his tires. Moving over to Brady's third dynasty, there's a lot of great players on his team. Obviously, it's really hard to pick out one, but I think I gotta give the MVP to Tom Brady. Not only is he an important, QB2 leagues, QB is incredibly important to get production on both QB spots. But man, picking Tom Brady up with the 11th round pick, he continues to defy father time and puts up historical numbers. QB1 for the season to date. And he's likely going to be top tier for at least more years ahead. So that's got to be the MVP for me for Brady's third dynasty. Over to John. The MVP for me for John's team is Debo Samuel for sure. Debo came into the season with fantasy managers all around, not really sure if he was going to be even the WR1 on the Niners, passing offense. People thought maybe Brandon Ayuk could be the WR1. But really, we see it now. He is more than just an WR1 for a team. He is WR5 for the entire league, and his dynasty value has to be extremely high. I think if there was a draft restart, he would likely be a first 2-round pick in a dynasty draft format. So immense value with that magic 11th round pick. For Adam, it's hard just because it's been tale of sort of two halves. So first half, it's going to be Derrick Henry. That's easy. Second half, though he's been sort of injury stricken, he's still getting immense, tremendous value out of or production out of Alvin Kamara. So I'm going to do that. First half, Derrick Henry. Second half, Alvin Kamara. Moving over to David. It's been a tough season for Chota, but I think I'm going to give it to two players. I'm going to give it to Melvin Gordon and Tony Pollard. Obviously, neither of them are top-tier players, but he's got great value for Melvin as he picked him in the 13th round as a solid RB2, and Tony Pollard picked him up the 17th round pick, solid RB2 as well, and potentially more with if Zeke ends up sort of not being able to really get the production value that he's been getting or the volume that he's been expecting over the season, and Tony Pollard steps up. All right, last team. Moving over to Ben. I already said this, but Cooper Kupp, man, I seriously just look at Ben's roster, and boy, am I thankful that Ben didn't somehow find his way into the playoffs. Like, if Christian McCaffrey really was not injured, Brandon might have the season high in standings in terms of wins out of our entire league. So that's all I got on week 14. Again, sorry I wasn't able to do some slides. That just takes up usually a couple hours for me to do so, and I literally just was able to get out of bed, took a shower for the first time at 6 p.m. So I just want to get this video out. Hey, it's bowl season, boys, and excited to be here with you guys. Excited for the next 2 weeks. Excited for the off season. And excited that anything can happen over the next couple of weeks with how our rosters and how our historical production has been throughout the league. So best of luck, boys. See you Thursday, Sunday, and Monday. Peace.